Hello,
Hi David,
how are you, Peter?
very good. How are you?
Excellent. I'm very good, thanks. So, how have you been getting on with the Z4?
Yeah, sort of driving a little bit part-time in addition to the Skippy. Like I mentioned, I want to um, work up to a higher license class, but also I wanted to get a little bit experience with a faster car. So I did maybe 3-4 hours of practice, and I did a couple of hours last week on Virginia.
Yeah,
It's not a great track to start learning a new car at, just because the track itself is very tricky.
very difficult. Yeah,
Uh,
very narrow.
yeah, but I was initially I was losing the car quite a bit. Just my habit from the skip is to go full throttle very quickly.
Yeah.
So that results in spins usually.
Hmm.
I sometimes would spin at the end of the braking zone. Maybe I would overslow the car. I don't know what. So I think what really helped me is for learning the car is I turned off all the on-screen displays. Like I turned off the F-box, I turned off the delta bars, and I actually went ahead and did a time trial because like you get punished if if you do off tracks or spin a lot in a time trial. So
Yeah.
I just decided I won't bother about I won't even look at the lap times. I'm just gonna try to drive cleanly.
Okay.
And to my surprise, after 20-30 minutes, I was able to more reliably repeat my fastest lap times when I was really trying hard to go fast.
Yeah.
So
Oh, okay,
that
that's good.
was that was the way I managed to trick myself. And if you look at my last few sessions, they were mostly clean. I think there was maybe only one or two off tracks each.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah, you can see the number of clean laps is
yeah,
massively increased. Well, the number of unclean is reduced.
yeah, yeah. I even have 17 laps and 23 unclean. That's because when you reset, I guess
Oh, wow.
we upload 2 laps for each reset.
Good effort.
So
That's impressive.
right,
I think you should get some kind of award on VRS for that.
right, yeah. So I think I stopped trying hard, and I seem to be doing better.
Yeah.
Um, so that I'm still uh, quite off pace, um, but it's fine. I mean, I'm just getting to learn the car.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Um, yeah. So one thing that I've noticed is I think you're still running the the VIR setup.
Oh, yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't pay attention to this. Is it very different?
Uh, just trying to think back. I'm not entirely sure what I did to it. Um, let's see if it shows me. Because I believe for Suzuka, I'm using 2 wing. I think I might have increased the tyre pressures a little bit as well.
Okay.
But then again, the wing is the same, so they might actually be quite similar. Um,
I'll download the setup just in case. It's just my habit with the skip. I never change the setup. So
yeah, yeah. No, that's fair enough. But yeah, that might that
that
might
might help.
be instantly holding you back, so or
Okay.
unlock some time.
Okay, I'm doing it right now.
Oh,
I'm
okay,
updating it.
cool. Um, and there was something else I was gonna ask, but I've completely forgotten. Um, yeah, I think I need to just refresh this because it's not coming up. But yes, regarding what you were saying earlier,
Mm.
I certainly would advise not falling into the trap of trying to go for ultimate lap time, especially when you're sort of struggling for
Mm-hmm.
consistency and you're finding that you're crashing a lot or
Mm-hmm.
not even able to complete laps, because I've certainly been been through that, and it's quite easy. It's quite an easy trap to fall into, whereby
Yeah.
you get obsessed with lap time, and if you don't, nail the first two corners, you just abandon the lap or try too hard and just throw it off. And
Yeah.
even though you're perfectly capable of driving the car well, and keeping it all together for multiple laps in a row, because you're going for ultimate pace, you kind of, if you're not 100% happy with how the lap's gone, you just kind of throw it away completely, and
Yeah.
and that really breaks up your practice completely. So that you don't sort of fall into a rhythm, and you don't really make any progress, because you end up only really working on one corner, like the first, the beginning of the lap, and you completely neglect the rest of the lap. You completely neglect, finding a rhythm, basically. So yeah, what you've been doing with the time trials is definitely worth doing, and something that I would have recommended for sure. So so that's definitely good stuff. Right, so I'm just going to select this from the analyzer. Are you able to see my screen, by the way?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
By the way, there's a trick. If the selection gets lost, do not lose it. If you have something previously loaded, you can just change one of the laps that is selected, and then when you reload, new sessions would show up, but it would keep the old selection.
Oh, so it does the same as refreshing, but you don't lose your selection.
Yeah, I mean, if you change the selection, just a lap, let's say you change from fastest lap to average lap, it doesn't matter. It would actually, when you refresh, it won't lose the selection. But if you haven't refreshed in like 10 or 15 minutes, when you refresh, it would lose the selection.
Oh, okay.
So it just refreshes. It just refreshes this the cookies that remember the selection.
Oh, okay. Useful to know.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I noticed as well is obviously you're using a race fuel version.
Yeah, and that's because with the qualifying, I ran out of fuel on lap 2 after the out lap. So I figured I don't know how. I think when I talked to Renz last week, he said it's maybe half a second is the difference. Well, when you add more fuel.
Yeah, well, to be honest, it's really quite minimal. It's surprising. I think the difference between sprint race fuel and qualifying fuel is maybe even less than half a second. And the difference between a full tank of fuel and no fuel is probably more like a second. But when you consider it such a long lap, that's not really very much. The main sort of time loss is going to be acceleration zones and braking zones. Cornering doesn't seem to be as affected, so that obviously with the extra load you get slightly more grip, so that kind of offsets the extra mass. But yeah, so that would explain. That's definitely going to be costing you a few tenths at least. Although, yeah, it's not a huge difference, 28 litres. But also remember that your ride height is going to be slightly compromised as well. So obviously the ride height for the race setup is going to be set higher. And generally the lower you can go, especially with the front end, the more downforce you're going to get from the aero effect. So yeah, with that in mind, unless you have any questions, we'll jump in.
No, let's jump in.
So how would you prefer to proceed in terms of order of sectors?
Let's go chronologically.
Okay. So I'm skipping the first one.
Yeah.
Because that's just the run to the first braking zone, basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is quite a good corner for you. You're only a tenth and a half off.
Yeah. I worked on it yesterday, so it was almost half a second off initially, and then I worked on matching your breakpoint and the trace.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I think that's the best so far for this corner.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Well, we can see under braking, you pretty much well, you only lose half a tenth, really. It's only really from this point onwards that you lose a bit more time. So if we go into that, we can see that you're starting to run a little bit too wide versus the line that I'm taking. So I'm taking a slightly more direct route to turn. So these are actually numbered turn 1 and then turn 2. So I've got a slightly tighter line in between the two corners. So I've hooked them up. Well, that's not really true. I've shortened the distance between them essentially. But it's kind of win-win because that's put me onto a shallower radius, and I'm able to carry a bit more speed in addition to that narrower line.
Yeah, I remember I nearly ran off track there. I think I stepped on the outside curb.
Yeah, that's because I normally allow the car to get pretty close to the edge, to be honest. So if I'm close to the edge, you're definitely right on the verge. Yeah. So that was probably a little bit concerning at the time, but you hooked it up really nicely for the exit. We're pretty much bang on each other, from the exit onwards. So the only real difference in between these two laps is I've just got a slightly more tighter mid corner.
Yeah.
And I've carried a little bit more speed. It's difficult to really tell how I've done that in terms of the braking, because the braking trace, although we get on the brakes at the same time and a similar amount, and then we come off them at a similar time, a similar amount.
Yeah.
In the middle, the braking trace is quite different.
Yeah.
So you're, I would say, a little bit more uncertain in terms of your sort of pedal delivery. Generally, you want your inputs to be as simplistic as possible.
Yeah. So here I remember initially I was applying quite heavy braking at first, and that was slowing me down quite a lot. So I think I did like 70-80% braking, and then I tried to just brake more gently and then lift off some like you were doing, and then brake again more heavily before turning in.
Yeah. Well, that is the right approach to take. That is the right approach to take. But yeah, certainly, I'm not braking very hard here really at all. It's less than 50%, and that's because you want to be turning in whilst slowing the car down. So you don't want to be overworking the tires too much.
Yeah. So where do I start going wide? Is it
so you pretty much start going wide here.
The second braking phase.
The second braking phase. What's also interesting is so this is in the video where I have some oversteer. So obviously if you look, you're still turning in at this point, whereas I'm actually catching some oversteer at this point. Yeah. And that's why. Yeah. So you'll notice a few times I'm sort of breathing on the throttle. This area here is especially prevalent, and that's helping to recover from the oversteer. So that's a very similar technique to what we spoke about for the skip barber.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, you can apply the same thing really, even in this car. The only thing is obviously it's.
Is it the planned oversteer, or you're reacting?
It's a reactive oversteer. Yeah. It's just a result of this condition here where I'm braking quite hard, but I'm if we cycle it back just a bit, so this point here, I'm turning
also more,
I'm turning in quite hard, and I mean we're both carrying a reasonable amount of speed at this point, but because I'm trying to force a slightly tighter line, that's also inducing the oversteer. So it's certainly more risky to do this. This is pretty much. I mean, this lap for me was really, really good. Probably one of the best that I've done for all of these data packs. So it's right on the limit this corner. But yeah, certainly if you are, I mean, this has cost you a bit of time here, you know, not sort of coming off the brake enough, and then you've sort of compensated again after. But you know, this is really quite fine details that we're going into. I mean, generally this is quite a good sector for you. So I guess we shouldn't waste too much time. Because there's other areas in the lap where which are more significant.
I agree. I think the next is and I think 3-4. I think that's just the sequence. The line through that sequence is probably
So through the next series of S's, line is pretty much, you know, critical, and that's pretty much so. The most obvious thing to note where you've lost time. I mean, from here to here, you've actually gained time on me, but then here you lose a pretty big chunk. You know, nearly 2/10, and that pretty much begins all the way back here. So if we bring it back to the start, we can see that you've exited. So you got turn 1 and 2, but then the exit of 2, you've kind of allowed the car to remain a little bit too, let's say, narrow for the entry to the S's. So ideally you want to work on bringing the car a bit further over to the right as you enter the first S, let's say. And it's because obviously what that's done for me is, and also interesting to note, I'm on a wider line, but I'm also carrying less speed at this point as well. And that's because obviously if I start from a wider point, I'm going to have to turn tighter to then cut back. And that's the critical thing, really. So you see, obviously, I come from a wider line, and then I cut back on myself. I'm now underneath you. And then that doesn't really benefit me at this point. It's all really about setting myself up for this right-hander here. This is where the gain is. This is where I'm able to carry massively more speed. And obviously, in combination with that, a much tighter line. And obviously then that, to finish off, has given me a wider entry into the left. And you know, essentially, if you have an infinite sequence of S's, you want to kind of prioritize them equal amounts. So you've kind of prioritized the entry here, and you've got a really nice fast entry, but then you've compromised your exit slightly, and then you've got a sorry.
Was it? I'm thinking maybe the way I exited the previous turn is what positioned the car. I mean, it's not a very long straight, so coming out of 1 and 2.
That's true. It's not a very long straight, but it's a long corner, and you can still lose quite a lot of time even in a corner. So
I'm wondering, should I change something in how I exit the previous? Can we look at 2 again and just the very end, see why I don't?
You think maybe you're certainly not grip limited at this point.
No, I guess I just need to move off to the outside. Okay.
Because you're comfortably at full throttle at this point. So
got it. Okay. So essentially, once you clip the curb on the outside, on the left, I need to start moving
over to the right again. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I would say also that at this point here, you were in the position to make, let's say, a recovery effort. So if we just zoom in, this point right here, you are still carrying more speed than me by 1k, which is not much, but it's actually quite significant in terms of what it does to the exit. So if at this point you had the awareness to realize, I'm carrying a bit too much speed here, I'm a little bit too wide here, and it's going to compromise the exit of the next corner. If you had that awareness, then what you could have done is held this brake just a little bit longer to slow yourself a bit earlier, and then potentially catch back up to my line. So but in reality you've kind of compounded the issue. So you carry
Yeah,
more
yeah.
speed here, but then you're not slowing the car down enough here. So
Right.
you've kind of doubly whammied yourself
Mhm.
on
Yeah,
these.
yeah, yeah.
And
Okay.
we're probably going to see the effects of that wide line
Mhm.
into 4 as well,
Mhm.
because obviously it's going to compromise your entry into
Yeah.
the next one, which we are seeing immediately here.
Mhm.
Obviously this is carried through, so you imagine this whole
Yeah.
sequence, I've gained massively. It's probably like 3/10 of a second
Mhm.
in that one left-hander alone,
Yeah.
that left-right sequence.
Mhm.
Um, so
Yeah.
I've actually compromised myself. Sorry, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I see that you're staying further to the right.
Yeah. So at this point, obviously, I'm carrying much more speed,
Mhm.
and I remember now actually on this particular lap, I was probably actually carrying a bit too much speed at this point,
Mhm. Yeah.
because you're right. Here, I'm very wide,
Yeah.
very wide. So this is actually what this has done. It's actually compromised. I'm at the point now where you were before,
Mhm.
basically, where I'm in a position where
Mhm.
I've compromised my entry, and
Mhm.
if I don't do something about it, I'm going to compromise my exit as well.
Mhm.
So this is where I've had the awareness to realise that, and I've got on the brakes a bit sooner than you, and I've
Mhm.
slowed the car down significantly more than you
Mhm.
at this point. So I've immediately, performed some damage limitation, let's say,
Yeah.
and I've immediately compensated for my
Mhm.
running wide
Mhm.
here. I've immediately
Mhm.
compensated by dropping my speed down
Mhm.
here, so that I can then come back and maintain a tight line out, and then I even managed to get a better exit than you at the end, despite at the beginning of that corner you having essentially
Yeah.
all the advantages.
Mhm.
So it is possible, if you have the early awareness, to rectify a small error or a
Mhm.
to I can't even speak, compromise your line to make it up later on, or to not cause
Yeah.
damage further on.
Am I braking too much here? Since I think I brake later, but you seem to brake quite.
So let's have a
Quite
look
a-
at that. You are definitely braking more. You are definitely braking more, and what that does is it puts you quite tight here. And then, so yeah, you are really. At this point, you're carrying too little speed,
Mhm.
because if you look here, how tight you are.
Yeah.
If we play that through, what that does.
So I
you're-
shouldn't really be hugging the curb so much.
Well,
I should think of it as a sort of
it's a
late
long
apex.
corner, exactly. So it's such a long corner that you basically, what you want to do is treat it as like there's two apexes, so two
Mhm.
clipping points. So you want to
Mhm.
have your tightest line is going to be here, and then ideally you want to let the car just run out slightly before coming back.
Okay. So when the curb on the right hand side starts, I want to clip it or just go very close
Yes,
to it, and then run out a little bit, but very small bit. Like what's it? Couple of meters or 1 meter?
probably like a meter. Yeah.
Probably like a meter. Okay.
I mean, we can have a look actually. We got obviously the line distance. So it's half a meter.
Half a meter. Okay.
Yeah. So it's pretty small.
Yeah.
Although at this point, no, so it's still
I guess I shouldn't really be touching the curb. I think I try to just
get close to it.
get close to. Yeah. So should be close, but not on the curb.
Yes. The more important thing is to not be so tight mid corner that
Mhm.
you're unable to come back underneath yourself.
Mhm.
So I'm in a
Mhm.
position right here where I'm able to get a faster exit purely because I've put myself in the situation where
Mhm.
I can use more track on the inside on the exit because I'm coming
Yeah.
from further out.
Yeah.
So by turning in as early as you've done, essentially you've limited what you can do on the exit.
Yeah.
And then so to finish off, our lines again diverge slightly. So interestingly, you've put yourself in a better position for the next left-hander, which is good, because obviously you've not had such a good exit, and you've turned that into a positive in another way. So we'll see what that does for you in the next sector. Obviously, looking at the time, unfortunately, it's not worked out for you.
Yeah.
So the first thing that is immediately obvious is that you're braking. Let me just check to see if I was braking at the end of the previous one. Nope. So on this particular lap, I didn't brake at all into the left-hander.
That's the next one, actually.
Oh, whoops.
I want to look at 4.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay.
You're lifting off. You're beginning to lift off.
Beginning to lift off. Yeah, we're both sort of beginning to lift off. You just a fraction earlier. But the key thing is that you brake.
Yeah.
Which I think is going to turn out to be unnecessary. And one thing that immediately stands out is similar to the previous corner. You're really tight mid corner. So we see this. You're really tight.
Yeah.
What that means is you've basically had to re-accelerate the car, because essentially you've had a compromised line for the exit by doing this. So
and you're way more patient than I am.
Yes.
I guess I just don't wait for the car to turn enough and point in the right direction before.
In fact, you're really early on the throttle. So yeah, you're actually on the throttle before you even come off the brake.
Right.
Whereas this is actually quite an unusual corner in the sense that I'm not trail braking even at all. I'm literally coasting, which is something that I very rarely do in the BMW.
Yeah.
But because the way the entrance to this corner kind of has the elevation upwards, you get quite a lot of front load, and the car turns in better than normal. Yeah. So to sort of minimise that, what you want to do is kind of coast and be, like you say, be a bit more patient. Because what essentially has happened with you is, because you've gotten the brakes, the car's turned in really well, and then to compensate for that, you've had to get back onto the throttle to essentially push yourself a bit wider again to make use of the track that's available. But then obviously that's put you on a really tight line mid corner, which has then compromised your line on the exit. So what have you had to do? You've had to then get back out of the throttle, which has compromised your exit massively. Yeah. So, I mean, as a general rule, if you find yourself in a situation where you are getting on the throttle before the exit a significant amount and then having to lift off because you've applied the throttle too early, that's gonna be a disaster. Basically, it's always going to pay off to just be more patient, to wait, and then only ever sort of commit to the throttle when you know that you're not going to have to come off again. Yeah. So that's basically what I've done there, and you also see obviously how you've got two dips in your speed. So you've kind of turned this into a 2-corner sequence, really. And
then you stay to the left once you start accelerating.
Well, at this point here, so let's go here, right? So at this point, obviously, I'm hard on the throttle. I'm not actually hard on the throttle just yet. so I get to full throttle eventually at this point. But it's really progressive and linear the way I'm getting on the throttle.
Yeah.
It's very deliberate.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just allow the car to run a little bit wider here, purely because you can get some oversteer as the circuit kind of crests and levels out. The car gets a bit light over the top, so you don't want to be.
You just let it go wide.
I just kind of let it run out, let it track out, and then when I feel that the car's got enough stability, I then bring it back tight. And then obviously here I'm slightly tighter than you. We're both quite tight at this point, which is good.
Yeah. Okay.
So then into Degner 1, I've got a slightly... Well, we're pretty much on the same line. It's very, very similar. The obvious thing really is... and this is quite a similar sector for both of us, but you're carrying less speed pretty much throughout.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, well, maybe that's because you're braking earlier, but it's not. It's because
I just carry less speed from the previous.
Because you've had a bad exit from the previous corner. So in reality, you probably could have broke later than me because you were and that then would put you, from being underneath my trace to bang on my trace.
Right.
But this is a corner certainly where you need confidence. Because it can be quite scary, especially if you clip the curb on the inside. That's normally a bad thing.
It's interesting how I very gradually apply the brakes. I don't know why I do this.
I think that's just this corner, because I've seen you brake elsewhere, and it seems to be.
It's just I never looked at this one. Well, I think I looked at it before, but this looks very. I mean, I'm taking a note. I should just be harder on the brakes.
Yeah, generally, unless you're turning at the same time, but even then, you can pretty much. The rule really is to get on the brake pressure you need as quickly as you can. If you're turning and you need to get on the brakes, then generally you still get on the brakes quickly, but you don't brake as hard. So say turn 1 where I only braked up to 48%, but I still got on the brakes quite quickly. It's just like bang, and then but only to this level. So this is, I would say, a bad thing to be doing.
Right.
But it's not costing you too much time. You pretty much just overslow the car, especially here. Probably because you don't quite have the confidence to commit to the corner as much as you probably could. And also on the exit, you can see obviously how much extra speed you could have carried based on where you've ended up. So obviously you're much tighter on the exit. So you could definitely have carried. The evidence is there that you could have carried more speed. Now, Sector 7, which is pretty much just one corner where unfortunately you've lost half a second. Which obviously is depressing, but but at the same time you can find half a second just by fixing one corner, so that's a good thing. So pretty much at this point we're under braking basically. We're pretty much the same. It all really unfolds for you after that point. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, why is he taking such a tight line? Because that's pretty much where you've lost it. It's almost like you for some reason felt like there was a lot less grip than you thought there would be, or you felt that the corner was going to be tighter than you realized. Maybe this was an unusual lap.
I think I still touch the curb, but that's near the end of where the curb ends. I don't know why I'm.
So here you think?
Yeah, but then I'm pretty much going. Yeah, I'm going straight to that point. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
I guess I'm just over slowing, and then
you are.
I'm turning really well.
Yeah. So at the point where
And
I'm off the
yeah,
brakes, you're still
yeah,
40% on the brakes.
yeah.
So
So maybe that's it.
you're just overslowing the car basically.
Yeah.
You can afford to basically take more speed through here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Obviously, what you're going to have to do to deal with that is to delay your throttle application,
Yeah.
which you can see that I've done that. But yeah, again,
Yeah.
your throttle is really progressive.
Mhm.
Now, your throttle trace here is pretty much what I would expect to see coming out of a very slow speed hairpin, where
Mhm.
you know you need to be really early on the throttle but very gradual,
Mhm.
and you're really traction
Mhm.
limited, and you're turning quite
Mhm.
hard, and you're straightening the car up, and you know, you gradually get to full throttle as the
Uh-huh.
traction builds. But this is a fairly high speed corner, and
Yeah.
it's also quite heavily cambered, especially in the middle. So
Yeah.
where you hook up to that camber in the middle, you can get on the throttle quite hard as long as it's not too
Yeah.
early.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm much later on the throttle, but much harder on the throttle.
Yeah. Another thing I noticed, at least a few turns, is that I don't turn as much as you do. Maybe I just with the skip I never needed to turn the steering wheel that much, and the BMW just you can apply more steering lock.
Um, well, certainly, well, the Skip Barber is obviously mid-engined, which makes a difference to how the tyres are kind of worked.
Uh-huh.
Generally, in the BMW, because it's front-engined, the front tyres are more heavily loaded up
Uh-huh.
than in a mid-engined car. So
Mhm.
if we were to compare this lap with, say, my datapack lap from the Audi, we would see that
Mhm.
my steering trace is much less. So
Mhm.
I'm basically asking much less from the front tyres,
Mhm.
and that's because the more of the mass of the car is over the rear tyres, and
Mhm.
they're doing more of the work.
Mhm.
So yeah, with a front engine car like the BMW, you can afford to
Okay.
use more of the front grip by
Mhm.
asking from more of the tyres. But also, you're probably not turning the car as hard here because you're literally carrying 20 kilometers less
Right.
speed than you could be.
Mhm. Yeah.
So obviously, if you were to turn as much as me at this point, you would
Yeah.
end up really tight.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's a combination of two things, really.
Okay.
If you were to come off the brake sooner to allow yourself to
Do
carry
you
more speed.
downshift faster than I do, or not really? Do you only downshift to third, and I downshift to second?
I'm glad you brought that up, yeah, because that's the other thing. You go all the way down to second, whereas
Yeah.
I leave it in third.
Yeah, that's something I think I also use for my timing of how much to brake. I mean, subconsciously, I know I need to downshift twice, and I think if in the rate at which I downshift, I can really brake less.
Okay.
Right.
Okay,
No,
that's
'cause I
interesting.
I just figured that that's something I actually subconsciously use as a signal for when I'm done braking. When I'm done
Yeah,
downshifting, that's when
yeah.
I'm done braking.
Oh, okay.
So if I just downshift once to third, I think I should easily be able to reduce the amount of or stop braking earlier.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, if you tell yourself that you're going to take a higher gear than normal, that's typically always going to encourage you to carry more speed into a corner.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, that's certainly going to help you. If you're not focused on going all the way down into second, it's definitely
yeah.
gonna encourage you to carry more speed in.
Okay.
But as for sort of the habit of sort of tying together the downshifting and releasing the brake pedal,
Uh-huh.
I would say that's probably not a good habit to have.
Uh-huh.
In terms of sort of unlearning that habit, that's going to be quite difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But one way would be to mix up the timing of your downshifts. So say one lap you change down quite early and quickly, and then
Uh-huh.
another lap you deliberately stupidly delay your downshift. So
Uh-huh.
you pretty much keep it in fifth gear all the way up until the apex, and then suddenly you downshift for the exit.
Oh, so not even downshift in the braking phase.
As an exercise, yeah.
Uh-huh.
As an exercise to
Yeah.
get away from that habit of tying the
Yeah.
two together, because
Yeah.
ideally they are separate things and
Yeah.
they're not dependent on each other.
They're definitely tied because what was it last week? Marty told me to not downshift to first in the hairpin before the straight on Hampstead, Miami, and when I tried to do that, I just bogged up my braking. I figured, okay, I've already learned it this way. I'll learn it different the next week
Yeah.
or next time. So
Okay.
this kind of adjustment should not, like changing my shifting, should not have any impact on anything else. So that's a good
Ideally,
good
yeah.
exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You imagine if you're in a situation where, I don't know, you're not able to downshift for whatever reason. Say if you're driving the Formula Renault, which is quite sensitive to that. If you go for a downshift too early,
Yeah.
a lot of the time that car won't let you downshift if you downshift too early,
Right.
because it's
Yeah.
got over rev protection.
Yeah.
And if you're in the similar habit to what you're experiencing, you'd probably end up overshooting the corner because the downshift didn't come when you wanted it to.
Yeah.
So ideally you'd want to still be confident on making the corner quite well, and just having them as being independent things.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, so obviously on the exit you're much tighter, but then you don't really ever have the chance to benefit from that. So I mean, you allow the car to run out wide eventually, which is going to give you the best line into the right hander before the hairpin. But if we just have a look at that, because it's interesting. So you're tighter at this point, and then you run out wider, but then you start turning in again. So unfortunately, you've despite being at one stage wider than me, you've now compromised your entry again by just turning in a bit too soon.
Yeah.
For the fast right-hander, which it actually is quite important. It might seem like it doesn't really matter because it's all about the hairpin, but this is what sets up your braking for the hairpin. So obviously I come from a wider line, so what that does is it allows me to brake in a straighter line under braking. So if we look at that, we can also see that you're still turning quite hard to the right, whereas I've pretty much allowed the car to almost brake in a completely straight line. And what that's allowed is it's allowed me to brake harder. This is pretty much right on the limit of braking grip available, let's say, and look how quickly I've decelerated the car. Obviously what that's done is given me a tighter line in the hairpin, so I'm obviously covering less distance, and I've won 2/10.
Yeah, I think the previous session I actually was braking way more than you, so I think that's a correction, but it's typical. I overcorrect.
Oh, okay. Well, that's okay. It's better to overcorrect than undercorrect, I would say.
Yeah.
Because you can always ease back from an overcorrection.
Yeah.
What I would say is, if I was driving your car and I was right here, what I would be doing is continuing to brake slightly. So you're pretty.
Because I'm tracking out.
You're tracking out. You're quite deep at this point. So I'd be wanting to recover some of that back. Because obviously you're in the position now where you can potentially get a better exit than I've done. So although you've cost yourself mid-corner, you can sacrifice that for a better exit. But
so a little bit of trail braking to turn the car more
exactly
and straighten out the
rather than what you've done, which is you've compromised your entry but then you've compromised your exit because you've not corrected yourself here.
Got it.
So this is Spoon, and this again, unfortunately, isn't one of your good sectors. But this is a lot more subtle than what we've seen previously. Although, so it's interesting because under braking, it seems like I'm carrying way more speed, and I'm carrying a reasonable amount more speed. The time difference isn't that significant. There's not really that much to see.
It's a very short distance, so
exactly. All of the time loss is pretty much here. So, and that's all down to line. So if we bring it back to here, we can see that. So the first curve in Spoon, you take a tighter line than me. Which is fine. But then at this point here, you are wider, which again is fine. But then right here, you're too tight because the corner hasn't finished yet. If the circuit was going down here, you get an awesome exit. But unfortunately, the circuit's going over here. So you're too tight at this point, which is what's cost you. So if we zoom out, and so unfortunately you're
here the other tricky thing is I think I try to straighten the car more so that I can be on the throttle.
Oh, okay. I think you'll find you're on the throttle later than me, which is what we can see here. So essentially, if we bring that back,
I was spinning out a lot over there.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a very difficult corner, I must admit. It's very difficult because, in fact, it's one of the most difficult corners on the whole circuit. Because this point here can be really tricky because you've carried loads of speed at this point. It's a very high speed entry, and then you don't really have much of a straight. You're still turning, but then the circuit tightens even more, so you have to slow the car down more. So obviously we're both on the brakes again here, and that can really induce some oversteer.
Can you actually go again to the beginning and look at the shifting? Because most of the time I only shift down to fourth and then shift down to third during the second braking phase, and I guess you downshift to third. So
I downshift before I start braking for the next one. So that again, that's good observation.
And you're already off the brakes when you downshift the last time. Okay. I guess I have the habit from the Skippy to only downshift when braking. But you don't need that with the BMW.
I would argue that you probably don't need it with any car. I mean, it probably varies depending on what the corner characteristics are. I guess with the Skippy it helps to turn in when you downshift.
And I would otherwise have to use the clutch, and I don't use the clutch for downshifting. That's why. So Okay, so that's another good place to exercise untying the braking and
absolutely
shifting.
That's definitely a good point for you to work on it. So braking, getting your downshifts done there, your first two downshifts, but then coming off the brake, then doing your downshift to third before then braking again.
Okay.
But yeah, really, this exit here is pretty much because at this point here, you've got a wider line than me, so you're in a stronger position than me to get a good exit at this point. I think what's sort of killed it for you is you tried to over tighten the exit. So rather than just accepting that the corner is starting to open out and just committing to the throttle, you've sort of delayed your throttle application, as we can see. You're kind of playing with the throttle, which I would say is probably not such a good thing. I would wait. Don't touch the throttle at all until you're ready. And
when
then
do you touch the curb? Is it? Do you remember? Is it when after you?
Which curb?
Step on,
the curb on the right.
The curb on the left.
Curb on the left.
Yeah.
I get close to the curb on the left.
You get close, but you don't.
I don't touch it. Yeah. I try not to touch it. Yeah.
And are you? I think remembering, looking at the video, I think you did a little bit of trail braking, or you just very gently was on the brakes.
Yeah. Well,
right around the closest point, right? The closest point to the curb, you were still gently braking.
Well, if the curb is here, then yes.
Okay.
It's interesting actually, because if there is no curb here, then that would explain why I'm tighter here. So I would say you probably got slightly too late of an apex here. So you've basically set it up for an awesome exit, but you've not really delivered in terms of getting on the throttle. So you've prepared yourself for an awesome exit, but then you've not got on the throttle early enough.
Okay.
Basically, I mean, I was probably flirting with danger here on the exit. But that's kind of what you need to do to really get the time out of it. And obviously from here to 130R, that's nearly half a second in the exit alone. Despite having a line where you could have capitalized.
Okay.
So then 130R, which I don't like, because it's definitely one of those point and shoot corners.
Yeah.
By that I mean you pretty much aim. I was going to say aim and fire, but that would be far too cheesy. But you basically, it's about timing. So timing the perfect, point to lift off, to turn in, the perfect amount to turn in. But once you've done that, it's pretty much that's it. You committed to it. You've only got one input. It's not like a long corner where you can modulate your inputs to compensate for what you've done. So the first thing that I can see here, obviously, is that you brake slightly earlier. Perhaps a little bit less confidence. But let's just have a look at this and see where you apex. It's difficult because we can't see the curb. But I guess we apex at the same time, but you're on the power much later. And this has to be a confidence thing. Because if we look at the line that we take, you're actually on a better line. So that at this point right here, there is no reason whatsoever that you can't be on the throttle.
I guess I'm just worried
about going on
with
the curb.
The car,
on the
I'm still not used to when I can go full throttle and whatnot. I guess I would have quite a bit of downforce here. So that should help.
And this is actually a corner where you can, like, the time loss by being too eager with the throttle and then lifting out is actually quite small relative to other corners. Because there isn't an acceleration zone after here. If there was an acceleration zone after here, then that would be quite important. But since there isn't, you've got loads of speed at this point, you can afford to get on the throttle a bit too early, even if it means that you have to then lift. So next time you go out, don't be afraid of getting on the power earlier, even if it means that you then have to come off to save yourself from having an accident.
So you're braking a little bit more than I do. Is it
a little bit longer? Well, if you look at this, it is because
you have more speed.
I've got more speed and I brake later. So obviously I'm going to have to slow the car down more to have the optimal speed through. It's interesting when I see this. Obviously, if we were to consider my lap as being, perfect, which it isn't, obviously there are moments where you are perfect or better, because
Right.
you know, obviously at this point you're losing speed, this point you're losing speed, but here you've got the car at 100% of its performance. I think it's stuff like that that's quite interesting to see in telemetry. And again here,
Yeah.
but here you are destroying me. So let's just have a let's just have a let's just have a look at that.
I'm braking less. So.
You're braking less, so you're not slowing the car down as quickly as you could do. And when we zoom in, we'll see that you've heavily compromised your line by doing that. So this is actually one of the few occasions that I that I ever max out braking in the BMW. So obviously at this point I'm actually 100% on the brakes, so I'm totally reliant on the ABS to stop any lockups, but I'm willing to do that because it's a hot lap, and that is when you are slowing the car down as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So this is the heaviest braking zone on the whole circuit by far, because you're carrying the most speed and you're braking to the least speed, minus the hairpin, and you can do it completely in a straight line, so you can afford to brake harder. That's definitely the first thing. The second thing is obviously because you've broke less, as I'm coming off the brakes and I'm turning in, you haven't slowed down enough, so you're continuing to have to slow down the car, which has meant that you've run wide here. So even though you've gained under braking, you've massively compromised your entry into the last corner. So obviously the radius of our two lines are completely different here. I'm able to carry much more speed here, which I'm obviously then carrying. Well, I'm not really carrying because I've won it all back in this zone here. By the time we get to this point, you've pretty much caught up. And then the line across the start finish straight is pretty good. I'm fractionally tighter, which obviously is going to mean I'm covering less distance.
That's again same reason. I noticed if I turn less, I can. I think I go full throttle. I don't lift off, and I think you do lift off, and you say.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, clearly, the quicker way is to basically take that slightly tighter line, even if it means lifting. This is one of the this is one of the few zones again where you can afford to have a lift after getting on the throttle. And the reason that I'm doing that is because at this point, the car is making less power at the wheels basically than at this point. And also the fact that I'm upshifting into third gear tends to obviously jar the drivetrain, and it can create wheel spin, and also the track is starting to tighten again at that point.
Yeah, I think my point is that I intentionally go a little bit wider because that's with this line I feel I can. For me, that's like a risk to have to lift off.
The thing is, I would argue the opposite. Actually, I would say it's a bigger risk to tell yourself that you're going to commit to full throttle. So on the one hand, obviously your line is much safer. It's going to make it easier to maintain full throttle, but by committing to full throttle, it means that if you do have to lift because you're getting oversteer, you're going to be way less prepared to handle it. So if you're in the habit of having a slight lift, then if you need a bigger lift, it's not really an issue.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So yeah. Anything else that you would like to cover?
No, I think I should focus on the S's. I think that should give me a few tenths at least, and then there's another couple of turns where I should probably easily squeeze out another 2 tenths each.
Yeah.
So
I mean, sector 7 is I would say
Yeah.
probably your easiest fix.
Yeah.
Because there's a couple of corners. That one is one of them, and 130R's another one.
Yeah.
Oh, and also the exit of the second part of spoon.
Mm-hmm.
Areas where you can afford to be a bit more confident in getting on
Yeah.
the throttle earlier and harder.
Yeah. Okay, so I think I might, since I haven't put in too many hours on this track, I think I'll probably continue next week as well. I mean, I'll do
Okay.
some time trials. I don't think I'm going to do races, but I'm going to do some time trials this week, and to help myself with the license thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think I would want to continue to practice a bit more on Suzuka, because starting a new track, it's always just the initial learning curve.
Yeah, you kind of resetting,
Yeah,
and
I
you
want to
won't
see
be able
how,
to apply what we've
yeah.
discussed.
So yeah, and I'd like to be able to see like how far I can, how fast I
Improve.
can get on this track.
Yep, that totally makes sense.
Okay, cool. I have a bunch of homework. Thanks for all the tips.
You're welcome. Cool.
Cool.
Until next time then.
Yeah. Talk to you soon. Thanks, David.
Thanks a lot and good luck.
Thanks.